Okay, good morning. Again, of Shabbos, we are doing today Tezayin on base. We will start though on Tezayin Amanal. We'll start by the Gemara. Again, the Mishnah just told us that Umnim, when they're reading, when time to say the Shema, and they happen to be working, they're in the middle of a tree. So we learned that the Umnim, the Mishnah told us, they're able to say the Shema in the rosh of the tree or top of a pile of stones. But not Shemana Esrei. Why not? Because Shemana Esrei requires davening for rachamim, and a person is not necessarily going to be able to sustain that when they're nervous about teetering and falling off. Says the Gemara, workers are able to say the Shema when they're standing on top of a tree or standing on top of a pile of stones. They're able to say the Shemana Esrei in olive tree, on the top of an olive tree or a fig tree. Why? Because those trees have a specially big canopy, and because the canopy is big enough and comfortable enough, they're even able to have kavana when they are at the top of those trees. But other trees, they have to come down in order to be able to daven, because those trees, the canopy is not big enough for them to be able to be comfortable. But the boss, the owner, he has to come down from the tree to daven. He cannot daven while he's in the tree. Why? Because his mind is not going to be settled. In other words, the workers' minds may not be settled, but by workers, we're mako that they shouldn't be taking away time from their work for Shemona Esrei so much. So if it's the right kind of a tree that will be comfortable enough for them to daven without being afraid of falling, we allow them to do so. But the boss, we say to him, you have to have more kavana. You need to come downstairs and daven. You cannot simply do it from the top of a tree. That's point number one. The second point is that we send the Gemara as follows. Yes, we talked about Rav Mary, who was the son of the daughter of Shmuel, who had been nivla to go when she was captive. It ended up that the person became Jewish, but we still nevertheless miyachas him to the mother. So Rav Mary asked a question to Rav. What was the question? Rav Mary, brother Rav Shmuel Rav Tanan. We learned in the Mishnah, workers are able to say the Shema when they're on top of a tree or when they're on top of this pile of stones. That's clear that they do not require kavana. Then if you require serious concentration, then you wouldn't be allowed to say the Shema on top of the tree. For a mini, but I'll ask you a stira. We have a brayse that tells us that somebody who says the Shema has to have kavana. Shenemar, as it says in pasuk, Shema Yisrael, Shema Yisrael. Halanu Aimer, and later on it says Haskes Ushma Yisrael. So later on in the Varm it says again Shema Yisrael. So Mala Halom Bahaskes Afkam Bahaskes. So just like later on when it says Shema Yisrael, it says Haskes Ushma Yisrael, and Haskes doesn't just mean here. Haskes means pay attention, not just Shema Yisrael. Haskes, pay attention. Yesterday, 2 days ago, if you recall, Testament from a base, we said that Haskes Ushma Yisrael is B'divrei Torah. But now what we're saying is Haskes Ushma Yisrael should be a limud. We could have like a sort of proto gezerah shava. That the same way one place it says Shema Yisrael, it requires paying attention, haskes. So too by Shema, it doesn't just mean Shema Yisrael, but also haskes. You have to pay attention. So if you have to require such attention, you see you're required to have such kavana, then maybe one shouldn't be able to say it in a tree, because in a tree, you're a nice guy, you mean well, but it's a tree. Ultimately, at the end of the day, how much attention could you be able to be paying while you are swaying in the middle of a tree, trying to harvest the fruit? So Ishtik, so Rava was quiet. So Amarle Rava says back to me, did you hear something about this? And you asked me a kasha, right? You know how it is with the rabbis. So you have a guy goes over to the rabbi, you ask him a question, but he already has an answer. He knows, but he wants to see what the rabbi is going to say. So Mary came to him, and he already knows what he has a position. Nevertheless, he asked him as a question. Rav is quiet. So he says, "No, what do you have to say about it?" So he says, "Look, this is what I heard. I'm Hacham Rav Sheishes, and I heard that there's an answer to this, that they're able to stay in the tree. It's not a stira, but they have to be batal malacha when they're in the middle of saying the Shema. What does that mean? That means that they could stay in the tree, and they have to do haskes. How are they going to happen? When you're middle of harvesting the fig or the date or whatever it may be, stop in your tracks, say the Shema. That's how you're able to stay in the tree and still have the requisite amount of kavana. Be able to be yet to both. Says the Gemara. 1 second. Stop. V'atanya beis Hillel oimrim oiskim v'lachtam v'kairin. We had a Gemara already on Yud Aleph. We mentioned it, if you remember. We mentioned it a couple of days ago on Yud Gimel Beis. We discussed the prakta. And remember the situation where the guy was lying on his back, and the question was, could he move to the side a little bit to be able to say the Shema? We said for Rabbi Yochanan, he was allowed to do it because he was very, very corpulent. And what we asked, what do you mean? Why is it such a head to just for Rabbi Yochanan? We looked at the Gemara on Yud Aleph, and the Gemara on Yud Aleph said about Beis Hillel that Beis Hillel says matin v'kairin. You're allowed to lean on the side and say the Shema. So we asked it as a question. We'll put that on the side now. But over there, Beis Hillel said that also you're imdim v'kairin, you are yeshvim v'kairin. And one of the things that Beis Hillel said was oisen b'melachton v'kairin. You were able to do work while you were reading the Shema. So you're telling me now that you could stay in the tree and say the Shema, but the only way you could do the fulfill your obligation of saying the Shema while you're in a tree is if you're haskes. And how are you going to be haskes if you're in the middle of a tree? Stop harvesting. Just relax for a few moments to be able to say the Shema. But Beis Hillel said no. Beis Hillel said you're able to be Isaac Malachta. You're able to continue working while you are saying the Shema. Now you might have thought like Isaac Malachta just meant like you're doing your job, meaning not literally doing your job for that second, but no, the Gemara said literally, and while you are in the middle of harvesting the fruit, you are able to say the Shema. Was Beis Hillel talking about a tree? Okay, this is how the Gemara is assuming it. There's the Gemara loy kasha. When Beis Hillel says that you're that you're in the middle of doing the work, and you can have the ability, nevertheless, to still say Shema, that's talking about Perek Sheni. But obviously, Perek Rishon requires you to have sufficient amount of kavana that you are going to stop. Even Beis Hillel would agree. When Beis Hillel says, we're basically qualifying what we said on Yud Aleph. When Beis Hillel said, we don't mean literally the whole of Shema. It's one bit of Shema that you have to stop working. What is that? Perek Rishon. Taisus points out, actually, that can't be Perek Rishon. Look at Taisus, Haba Perek Rishon. It says, Lav Dafka Nava Kat Perek Echad. Cannot be Perek Rishon. Why? What did we just learn? We learned, if you look back on your Gimel and Beis, the first of the intermediate wide lines, the Gemara brought down from Rabbi Meir. The Rabbi Meir said that you need Kavanas Halev only by where? The first pasuk of Shema Yisrael, not Perek Rishon, just the first pasuk, just Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's the only thing that needs Kavana, not even V'ahavta. And what did the Gemara say after it brought down Rabbi Meir? Amar Rava halacha ki Rabbi Meir. The halacha is, in fact, like Rabbi Meir, that we do say that you only need to have kavanah when you say the first pasuk of Shema, not the first perek. So if that's the case, says Taisus, how's Rava here in this story with Rav Mary agreeing that you need perek rishon? So this is lav dafka. It doesn't mean perek echad. It really means pasuk echad. That's what we're talking about, is the first pasuk. Okay. So now it comes out that when Rabbi Hillel says, what does that mean? Only means the first pasuk needs kavanah. After you can do work the whole time. So Rabbi Hillel would agree that you have to stop working for the first, but when you say Shema. When you say Shema, you have to stop working. If you have to ready, you can be working again. Again, as I pointed out yesterday, this goes back to this Gemara in Tainus Chaf Gimel about the subtlety. It would seem to us like, what do you mean? Every worker uses the phone half the day. Like, no. The rabbis will worry about every second. Every second that you shouldn't steal from the Baal Bus. You're working for somebody, you should be doing the work. Not even be saying, stopping. How long is Shema going to take? A minute? Not even a minute. Not even a minute. Then is the Gemara. Tana Rabbanon. You have Poyim, they're doing work about a Baal Bais. So current Kriya Shema, they say the Shema. They're able to say the Berachas Kriya Shema. And they're able to eat, their lunch, their breakfast, whatever it is, and they can make the brachas before and after. In other words, hamaitzi, brachas hamazon. And they also can daven Shemini Esrei. Bless you. But they cannot be the chazan. They can't duchen if they happen to be kahanim. In other words, even if they're kahanim, they have a heter not to be going up to duchen because of the fact that they are supposed to be working. So says the Gemara, one second, we have another brayso that says V'atanya me'ein yudches. We have another brayso that says you don't daven Shemini Esrei in a situation of poilim, but it sounds like you do a me'ein yudches. What is me'ein yudches? Me'ein yudches, Rashi explains, is havinenu. If you recall, the last time we discussed havinenu, it's going to come up again in the future, but was Gimel Amud Aleph. Gimel Amud Aleph, we talked about when somebody goes to a korva, when somebody goes to a rune, that they're able to daven a tefillah kitzara. And over there it seemed like a machlokes Rashi Tosfos. Rashi said it was a havinenu tefillah kitzara, and Tosfos says it was merubim sarchi amcha. And we ended up, Tosfos agreed with Rashi that it was all havinenu. This time around, everybody agrees. Me'ein ches we're referring to as havinenu. Tosfos doesn't say anything. Rashi just says it's havinenu. That's what it is. So we have a steer in the brisa. Was the worker able to say the full Shemona Esrei? What does Havinenu? What is Havinenu? Havinenu is the first three brachas of Shemona Esrei and the last three brachas of Shemona Esrei. But the middle brachas are all consolidated into one thing. The middle brachas are all consolidated into one bracha. That's Havinenu. So which one is it? Rav Sheshes says Loi Kasha. It's not a question. Har Gamliel, Har Rabbi Shua. Later on, we're going to see it's going to be Machlokes Gamliel Rabbi Shua about what exactly is the normal Shemona Esrei the person does. According to Rabbi Gamliel, the normal Shemona Esrei the person does is Yud Ches, is the regular Shemona Esrei that we have 18 brachas. According to Rabbi Shua, the regular Shemona Esrei the person does is Havinenu. A person doesn't, according to Rabbi Shua, doesn't normally say Yud Ches brachas. He normally says Havinenu. So he says 7 brachas on a regular basis, like we do on Shabbos or Yantif. He does normally, according to Rabbi Shua, he do regularly 7 brachas. The middle is Havinenu. Says the Gemara. That doesn't work. To say that one brisa is Rabbi Gamliel, one brisa is Rabbi Shua doesn't make sense. Why? Because to say one brisa is Rabbi Shua, when you're saying Havinenu, then why would you need to say that is talking about a situation of a worker? Because according to Rabbi Shua, it's Rabbi Shua, my area, Payalim, Afilu Kol Adam Nami. According to Rabbi Shua, Havinenu is normative for anybody, not a payal. So you have another brisa that says that the payal is going to say Havinenu. It's shkayach, even if he wasn't a payal. Even if it was a regular balabas, he would say a havinenu. For Rabbi Shua, it's not a vort, it's not a chiddush. You're not telling me something new to tell me that a payal is going to be saying havinenu. A payal is going to not the only one who says havinenu. A regular balabas, a regular guy says havinenu. According to Rabbi Shua, everyone says havinenu. If everyone says havinenu, this will be no chiddush to tell me this vort over in the name of Rabbi Shua, talking about this second brisa of Tanya me'ein ches. We have a similar brisa talking about a payal, and it says you say ein me'ein ches. That's not a vort for Rabbi Shua. So Rav Sheshes your answer doesn't work. So the Gemara says that Rav Sheshes has to change the answer. It has to be that we're going with Rabbi Gamliel on both. What do you mean Rabbi Gamliel on both? But like Kasha, so what do you mean? One says Bein Ches, one says a full Shemona Esrei. What's the difference? So like Kasha, Kan Ba'osim B'Schar and Kan Ba'osim B'Sudasan. You have different kind of workers. You have workers who are Osim B'Schar and workers who are Osim B'Sudasan. Right? A worker who's Osim B'Schar means he works for you, but he lives outside and he gets paid. Such a person, we're going to be very, very, very make of what he has to say. We want him to get back to work as soon as possible because you're paying him. He should be able to get back to work, so we're going to let him say just a Me'ein Ches. But a worker who's Osim B'Sudasan, a worker who's working essentially for his meals, meaning he's basically getting his room and board by you. He gets to eat by you. He works for you. You take care of him. So such a person, we're going to be much more makel and let him say more because in effect, he is getting his full sustenance from you. It's not like he's getting some separate payment. And so therefore, we will let him say the full Shemona Esrei. V'atanya, as Rashi points out, this V'atanya is not a shaila, it's a benichusa. It's a riot to what we're saying. We'll see another distinction between workers who are Osim B'Schar and workers who are Osim B'Sudasan. Where is this? Hapayalim, you have workers who are Osim Malacha Eitzel Balabayis. Workers who are working Eitzel Balabayis, Karin Kriyashba, they're able to say the Shema, Umaspalin, and they can daven, V'oichlan Piton, and they can eat their bread, V'ein V'varchan Lefonel. They do not make a bracha before that. Why? Because the bracha before is the Rabbanan. Avon bevarchen la'achareh, but they could make the brachas after, meaning berachas hamazon. Avon bevarchen la'achareh shtayim, but they could make the brachas of berachas hamazon, 2 brachas. Berachas hamazon we know has more than 2 brachas, right? We have Hazonas Takel, right? Al Aretz Val Hamazon, right? We have Bnei Yerushalayim, right? We have different brachas. We make 2 brachas. So how is that going to work? Rashi explains. The Gemara first explains. We'll say Rashi in the second case. That how's that going to work? Bracha v'shana kitikuna. You make the first bracha of Hazanas Olam. You make that regular. Why? That's the midarais of a chalta v'savot of a rachta. Shnia. The second bracha is Pesach v'berachas haaretz v'karl and bnei Yerushalayim v'berachas haaretz. And the second bracha you sort of make an amalgamation. You make like a havinenu of benching, right? You basically take the rest of the brachas of berachas hamazon and put it all together. When are we talking about boys and bischaron? We're talking here about workers who are oisim bischar, meaning they're making separate wages. So we want to get them back into the game as quickly as possible. Aval oisim bisudasan, but workers who are actually working for their bread. In other words, they're not working for a separate salary. They're working for their food. They're basically living by your home and room and board. That you give them the food, you take care of them, and they work for you. So such people, we're not worried about them having a few extra seconds to be able to say over the brachas of benching. So, oh, Shoy Balabais Mesavi Mono. Let's say the Balabas is with them, right? Remember how this Bryce started. It said, Apoyim Shoy Oisim Melocha, Eitza Balabais. Sound like the Balabais was with them. So the Balabais is sitting there with them, he's eating with them. So then, because clearly he's not so makbid. He's clearly more makel. So even if they're Oisim Bischaron, but the Balabais is sitting with them, then that would also be a situation we see the Balabais is not so makbid, and we would not be so concerned about them having to rush back to work. So a couple of things to mention. Well, let's start out with this Tosfos. The Tosfos says, Tosfos says as follows. If you look at the bottom Tosfos, v'chaisim v'berachas. So on the side they put out that it should be Pesach, not v'chaisim. The Gemara just said Pesach in our versions. Okay, maybe it's different gears. Then look at this line of Tosfos. It's unbelievable ingepackt. The little tiny Tosfos, what he says. What does he say? Even though that they are mida araisa, what does it mean? What's mida araisa? What is mida araisa when we bench? Which part of benching is daraisa? Azan Tzailim, the first bracha. What is Taisus mashma? It sounds like that's midaraisa. Says Taisus, it sounds like the other brachas of benching from Taisus are midaraisa. And Taisus is pointing out, yesh kach. So how then do we make a shmush? We're making now an amalgamation. We put all the brachas together, a beres hamazon, and just mash them together. Taisus says, yesh kach b'yad chacham la'akar dav min ha'torah. Taisus says we're able to. The rabbis had the power to be oiker something from the Torah in order to ensure that the balabas would get his fair share of the labor because of the fact that they take up too much time. It's mind-boggling. Number one, how is the rest of benching considered daraisa? Number two, you're saying that the rabbis have the ability to sort of be oiker things from daraisa because the balabas feels he's not getting his full 8 hours a day. I mean, that's an unbelievable line, no? So first of all, point out that the Tosfos Rosh doesn't have this line. So if you look at the Tosfos Rosh over here, what does Tosfos Rosh say? Tosfos Rosh says, Yesh koyach biyad chachamim letaken ulekatzer habrachas lepoyalim. The rabbis have the ability to be metaken, to be mekatzer the brachas of the benching for workers. Kadei sheyizkrum balibatim. So they should be hired. They should be hired by the balabas. This is a labor law. The Tosfos Rosh is saying, why are the rabbis saying that you don't have to bench so much? Because if you're going to sit there, I don't know if you ever was there to see these people. It's just people they bench. It takes 10 minutes. It's like, wow. 10, I wish I could have kavana. What's in my life, right? To say Berachas Hamazon, 10 minutes. Like, that's how they do it. And hold on. So Tosfos is saying, Tosfos Rosh is saying that we want to make sure these workers are going to get hired. And if this worker has a big inclination, he wants to say a very long benching, we say to him, listen, it's okay. Because if he's going to sit there, maybe the Baba is not going to hire him. He's going to hire somebody else who doesn't bench, right? But you say to the guy, no, you don't have to bench. The rabbis were accurate. They say you don't have to. They're attacking and mekatzer the brachas for Pilim in order to give them the best shot to be hired. This is how the Tosfos Rosh reads. This idea that the rest of the brachas of benching are daraisa is very difficult to sustain. We know the bracha of Hatayva Meitev was done for Haruge Beita, has nothing to do with daraisa. Okay, the second bracha Noidlacha Rachim. There's certainly elements of it that might be daraisa, but what are they? So the Beis Yosef already says that he doesn't understand what Tosfos is coming from. He doesn't see that. But I didn't want to bring down the Beis Yosef. I wanted to bring down the Pnei Shua. The Pnei Shua, because we haven't done much of the way of Pnei Shuas. But the Pnei Shua says the same. And he goes to the whole thing, says, I don't see, I understand that Chacham have times when they can be something in different Torah, I understand that. But Ancient Svar Lem the Ikur Chachamim Davman Ater Mishim Hefsid Mammon, because we want the balabas to have extra work to be able not to lose money. And where's the raya over here? Where's this deraisa by these brachas? Ubarmin din lo yadat lo mutzur ulazeh. Then hey, they give him brachas midaraisa. Hey, hainu shetzarach lahaski brachas hamazon and brachas haaretz brachas Yerushalayim. You have to say these things. You have to say things about the mazon, about Eretz Yisrael. But the masha enkim shetzarach lahaski b'shem malchus b'tchil b'sev lachsav l'chbav lachsav b'shem b'sev kol bracha. Havad elav midaraisa with all the brachas that we actually have in the brachas hamazon with a full nusach. That's not the raisa. You want to say that, you have to say the aretz, you have to say Yerushalayim, and that's the raisa. Fine, but you could do that all in shmush. You don't have to do all these brachas. So he says, the Bnei Yeshua concludes, I don't see it. V'yesh li'asav tzarchiyin, and then he concludes, and this is the reason I decided to do the Bnei Yeshua today. After I found that Beis Yosef said it, right? But he published it this way because this is the vart. When you bring down the vart on your own, it's your vart. Later on, you found the Beis Yosef said, okay, so you'll acknowledge it. Samachti, shekivanti, to the different Beis Yosef. But you want everybody to understand, you brought it down. Now, we understand today that the way it works is that because the Beis Yosef already brought it down, it makes it easy for the next generation to bring it down. So you have to bring down the Beis Yosef. But nevertheless, you're still able to take the credit that you worked on it, you worked on the sugya, and you are bringing it to light in that way. Okay. Continues going to the Gemara. We are now up to the two dots, yeah, and we already had this Gemara, so we're going to fly through. We already know this Gemara very well. Says the Gemara, Chasam Pater Mekriyashma, right? Everybody remembers the Gemara. We had it on your now. Tana Rabbanon, B'Shivtach B'Veisecha, right? A person is able to say the Shema when he's sitting in his home. Proud Isaac B'Mitzvah, but that excludes somebody who's being Isaac in a mitzvah. B'Lechtach B'Derech, when somebody's going on a road, bless you, proud L'Chasan, that excludes a Chasan. From here we see that somebody who's marrying a basula is part and saying Shema, but somebody who's marrying an almana is chayav and saying Shema. If you remember, Rashi back on your Aleph told us, why do you have to have separate limudim for a chasan and for Isaac mitzvah? If a chasan is Isaac mitzvah, why don't we just include them in the same limud as we have for a regular person? Regular Isaac mitzvah is part and saying Shema, so a chasan should be just included in that. What was the answer? The answer was because the chasan's Isaac in mitzvah is not to the same degree as an Isaac mitzvah regularly. Somebody's being Isaac in a mitzvah of bigger chaylim. Somebody's being Isaac in a mitzvah of shluach hakein. Somebody's being Isaac in a mitzvah of a sukkah, whatever it may be. He's building a sukkah now, so he's or any other mitzvah you can think about. He's doing something. He's getting a hammer, a nail. He's running around. He's doing something. Somebody's being Isaac in the mitzvah of getting married to a woman. What exactly is he doing? There's nothing he's doing. He's sitting there. So, as Rashi explains, that Isaac in mitzvah is machshava. It's in machshava, that Isaac in mitzvah. He's not being Isaac in doing anything. And nevertheless, we have to have a special limud for it. It's not just enough from B'Shivtach B'Veisach. We need to teach you that. You would not have known it otherwise. You had to be there at the time. So we said already on Yud Aleph, we mentioned there was a machlokes there. It seems like Rashi, the Rambam, others, exactly what the machshava was. The machshava of somebody's marrying a basula was either to be a bucky and understanding what had to be done, or it was Isaac in the mitzvah. The tirdo that he was having was in relation to whether or not he'd be mitzvah basulim. That was the two options that we had. We discussed that. If you recall, the tshuva from Ramesha talked about looking at the manuals before chasana to be able to understand what one has to do. Okay, that's not for now anymore. Says the Gemara. So we have two separate limudim for somebody who's being Isaac a mitzvah and for a chasan to tell you that they are part of saying Kriyat Shema. As we said, all practical Bizman Hazeh, this doesn't apply anymore. We already mentioned Shulchan Aruch again yesterday, right? That Bizman Hazeh, everyone has to say Shema because none of us ever have kavanah well enough, let alone to have the heter to say, oh, we don't have to say Shema the night of our wedding because we're actually going to be affected negatively, like halavai. We should be on the level to ever have kavanas. Nowadays, not all this is in this time, in their time. And nowadays, every chassan has to say Shema. Continues the Gemara. So, Mikana Markan says, "Absul Patav Salman Chayiv." My Mashma says, "The Gemara Papa Kiderach." What is the source for understanding this? We learn that from the words of Lechtach Derech Kiderach. Ma Derech Rishus Av Hachanam Rishus. Just like a derech is a rishus, you're going on the road. So too. anything we have is a resource, then you're gonna have to say the Shema. But if it's not a resource, then you'll be potter in saying the Shema. Mila Skin says the Dvar Mitzvah. Don't we have the ability to make his drush and say no? But the person was going for a Dvar Mitzvah, and nevertheless, we still tell him that he has to say the Shema. Then it should have said of Lechas. The fact that it says V'lech Techa, Shema Mina V'lechas Tidcho, the Mechayeves, right? It's V'lech Techa. But it's you're going on the road. That's when you're potter. But if it will be the for a mitzvah, so then you would be mechayev. My V'lech Techa, Shema Mina V'lech Tidcho, the Mechayeves. So the mitzvah petiras. Says the more Yihaki, my Arya Kanis of Psula Filu Kanis Salmona Nami. So why are you telling me that just the Kanis of Psula is potter in saying the Shema because he's not going on a Rishus, he's doing a mitzvah? So what about Alman? Alman is also a mitzvah. Says no. By Alman it's different. There's no tirda when it comes to marrying an Almana. Why? Because those two aspects that we mentioned before are not relevant. At least according to the Rambam's, one is not relevant to being mitzvah b'sulam. One would be a buck. It would depend on the person. Okay, we'll have to leave that on the side for now. But nevertheless, would be a situation that we don't consider the level of tirda of marrying an almana the same way one would be marrying a basula. Says the more mishum tirda filu tavas v'intabayam nami. If your vart is really not so much on being isik mitzvah, but really also a vart in tirda. So then if somebody had a ship, right, somebody's business was going down, it doesn't just mean a ship. If somebody's watching the stock market turn red and he has a lot of money in the stock market and he's like going to have a lot of tirdas, and maybe he's also be put in saying Shema has tirda. You say tirda is the issue, so then maybe they should be pater as well. Alam amar Abba bar Zaft amar Rav Ava Chaya b'chol mitzvah mesh b'torach when tefillin shari never been pair. And all of us have all mitzvahs in Torah except for tefillin because it's by tefillin there's a special limit of pair. So how could it be that all of us have all the mitzvahs, which means including Shema if he's very tired? Why is he very tired? He's tired because he's thinking about the person that passed away. So Amri Hasam tirda the rishos haka tirda the mitzvah. The difference between tirda of rishus and tirda of a mitzvah. Tirda of rishus is a situation where somebody's watching the stock market plummet, they're watching the ship sink, they're in Oval, they're feeling very sorry for the person that died. That situation is not a problem. A person then is able to say Shema. He doesn't have a heter because you're tired. Okay, fine, you're tired. We appreciate it. We're sad. Well, you're having a difficult situation, but you're not potter in saying the Shema. However, somebody who's not being tirda in a rishos, he's being tirda in a mitzvah, like a chassan marrying a basula, so then he would be pater. What about marrying an almana? And there he's not being tired. He's not being tired, so that's why he's chayv in saying the Shema. An aval is not having a tirda of mitzvah. He's only have tirda of rishos. There's no mitzvah. There's no mitzvah. He feels sorry that somebody passed away. But it's not a mitzvah to feel sorry that somebody passed away. It's not a mitzvah to feel sorry. You have to bury the person, but you don't have the mitzvah to feel sad all day. So if he's tired, he's tired. It's the tirda of rishus, not a tirda of mitzvah. No, the person's buried. The person's already 6 feet under. Okay, that's an einin. But that's what we'll actually talk about an einin a little bit now. We're going to get to actually talking a little bit about an einin right now. But yes, an einin, you're right. It's not going to have to do these mitzvahs, correct? Says the Gemara. Mishnah. We're up to the Mishnah now on Tezaino and Beis. Rachatz Laila Rishon. We're talking more about Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel, interesting practices. Actually, it's relevant if you remember the Gemara that we had. We had this Gemara back on Chesam Beis. Remember the Gemara told us about 2/3 of the way down. Tanya Amar Rabbi Gamliel, B'shlosh Dvar Ma'aven Esa Parsiim. Rabbi Gamliel says he really loves these Persians. Why? Tznum Machilasan, Tznum Beis Akisei, Tznum and Davar Acher. Whenever I think about this Gemara in Tezayin, I think about that Gemara on Chesam Beis. Says the Gemara, Gamliel was Rachatz Laila Rishon Shemesa Ishta. He washed on the night that his wife passed away. But didn't he tell his rabbi that Aval is also to be washing himself? So he says, look, I'm an istanis. I'm as Rashi says, I'm a person who's a meunak umefunak. I am a person who needs these kind of things. I have to wash. I'm sorry. Taisus istanis ani. We can't read the whole thing inside, but just the first few lines. Taisus says the aino aser lirchaytz b'mei evloi elam mishum tainug. You know what the iser is when somebody's in Aval to take a shower for tainug, for pleasure. But not for pleasure, but because somebody's in pain, then they could take a shower. It says more. I love this line. So somebody has gonna wash his hair. Why? Because he's having an erbuvia in his head. What is an erbuvia in his head? I have a bad hair day. He's having a major dandruff. I don't know exactly what an erbuvia beresha is, but he's having major problems with his hair. He's able to wash. I feel teich shiva. So to the Rashbam. was matter for your ledes, who was an avo, lurchos techshiva, lurchos nami b'tisha b'av. So you could take a wash even during Tisha B'av. Again, not for pleasure, but only to avoid pain. Tais learns that from Yerushalmi, skipping to the end of Taisus. This is what we're saying. Bechitza shel tainig is aser, but avo bechitza she'ena shel tainig mutter. That's how Taisus holds. Okay. So Rabbi Gamliel is basically saying the same idea, which is I'm an istinus. I'm not taking a shower for pleasure. I can't exist. Right? Remember, he's Rabbi Gamliel. He's from the family of the Nasi. You know, he's relatively pampered life. He says, I cannot bear it if I do not have a shower. So therefore, I'm not taking it for pleasure. I am taking it for pain. Amazing, though, right? He's taking a shower, and the Talmidim are there. They're saying, "Why everybody taking a shower?" That's what I can never get over. Is they didn't leave. They want to know every little aspect, every little detail. He had no privacy. Yeah. Says the Moshe Tevi when his servant Tevi passed away, Kibbutz of Tanchumin. So he was basically like sitting shiva for the guy. But didn't you teach us that you don't take tanchumin for servants? He wasn't like a normal servant. He was a kosher, a special guy. So therefore, I'm able to do it. Chassan and Mercer Liquors Kriyash Laila Rishon Curry. A chassan, if he wants to say Kriyash Shema first, now he's able to. Rabbi Gamliel's son says, "Whoa! I'm a loyal Rosh Lidos Hashem. Not everybody who thinks that they can do things can do it, right?" You know. The quick joke, we don't have time, but the quick joke in Navardik, they made there's two different types of yeshivas, right? There was Navardik, there was Slobodka. In Slobodka, they had the Gavlet Sodom, and Navardik, they had the opposite. So there was a story of Navardik, so they were excited, they were working on, not Gemara, they were working on making themselves humble. So like, I'm a nothing, and the other guy's like, I'm a nothing, and they're going back and forth like how much of a nothing they are. And the new guy in the yeshiva starts seeing that. This is what they're doing. So he says, the new guy in the yeshiva says, I'm a nothing, and the two older guys look at each other. He thinks he's a nothing, right? Not everybody can say they're a nothing. You have to be a level to be you're a nothing, right? So Rabbi Shimon says, not everybody gets the right to say when they want to say Shema because they think they can manage. They can't manage. Says the my time of Rabbi Gamliel, right? What is the reason Rabbi Gamliel that we just said in the Mishnah that he was taking a shower on the night that his wife had passed away? That he felt that the aninus was only a derabanan. And the situation of isness, they didn't make this gezerah. What do you mean? That his aninus is only derabanan at night? Taisus points out, what are you talking about? Aninus is only mid'araisa as it relates to Meiser, but it has nothing to do. Everything else is Rabbanan. So what do you mean? So what we're saying is that the Rabbanan were metaking the Aninus ke'en d'araisa. Everything is exactly the same, and therefore we have this question: if the Rabbanan are metaking ke'en d'araisa, so that means to say that an Ayin shouldn't be taking a shower. So how did he do it? He said, "Look, I'm already at the nighttime, and over here, the Aninus of Lila, the rabbis were not geyser on it for a istinus." Okay, but during the day you couldn't, right? But acharisa kiyamat afterwards, after the bitter day. So it says the Gemara, "Shemeis Tevi Avdoi," when Tevi's servant passed away. What does it mean? What did he do? He sat Mekabel Chumen. Now we have a Gemara that sounds a little bit jarring to the ears. Nowadays, there's no more slavery, and that's a wider topic about whether or not the Torah is a constitutional floor or a ceiling. We will suffice to say that it's a floor, and we cannot explain anymore now. When a servant passed away, so when you come out of the cemetery, right, they have a shura, so they wouldn't do a shura for a servant. Now, a servant, when they become a servant, they have a kanani. They are megayer, right? They're taking on mitzvahs like a woman, right? That's the gear is the shem avdus, not a gear totally. It's a gear shem avdus, but nevertheless, the chayiv mitzvahs like a lady, and so the halach is that when they pass away, you don't make a shur for them. And you don't say berachas avelim, tanchumi avelim. You shouldn't know from it, but after the cemetery, they stand in a line, and the person walks through the other walks through the line and say amakim menachem esran. So it says the Gemara, Maisu Meisa Shivcha Rebbe Lezer. So we have a story where the Shivcha Rebbe Lezer passed away. Nicholas Talmid of students came in to give him Nichum Avelim. Kevin Sharo Isam Ol Aliyah. So he ran upstairs to the porch. And the students came after him to give him Tanchumim. Nicholas Tam Pilan. So he ran to his guest house. And they chased him there. Nicholas Latrakman, he ran to the hole. And they chased him everywhere he goes. Amar Lam, Kimadumani, Shatim Nachim B'Poshrim. He says, I was hoping that you'll be burned by lukewarm water. I pour boiling water on you. Like, you're not getting the hint. I'm obviously not interested in being makabel tanchumim for this shivcha. Like action, didn't I teach you? Didn't I teach you that for servants you do not make a sure you do not do tanchumin for them? What do you say on the servants that passed away? You say on them the same way you would do for the cow who died or the donkey who died. As I said, not something that's very easy to stomach today, but nevertheless, what do you say? Hashem should fill up your lack, your what you just lost. You just lost your cow, you just lost your servant, same thing. And you don't have another verse that says, you don't give a hesped to Havana Mashfachas. If it was an Evid Kasher, you would give him a hesped. What would you say? He was a good man. He was a faithful person. And he sustained himself from his efforts, from his labor. So they said to Rabbi Yossi and Cain, Ma hanachta l'kisherim. What did you leave over for regular guys? If you say he was a good person, he was faithful, and he was yinanim yigia kapav, what else is there left? So you shouldn't say this about your avodim. But nevertheless, Rabbi Yossi clearly was not of the same opinion and was more willing to give a hesped for the servants. All right, so that's Gemara. Tana Rabbanan ein karen avis el shloisha. We only have 3 avis. Right, David Amelch, Gemara Sanhedrin tells us he wanted to add in. Why do you say okay, Avraham, okay, Yisrael, okay, Yaakov, okay, say like David? So Hashem said, all right, you want okay, David, you have to go through a big test. Hashem gave him the big test of Bathsheba, and that's why we don't say okay, David. Yeah, and why did it say only the 3 of us? Why not me? So the Gemara says, "Ein karni moes la arba," and you don't have more than 4 imayas. So the Gemara says, why is it that you only have 4 imayas and 3 ovens? So it says the Gemara, Avos, my time, and what's the reason you only have 3 Avos? If you want to say maybe it's because you don't know if you come from Reuven or Shimon, and so maybe then if you don't know if you come from Reuven or Shimon, so maybe that's a vart that you don't know who you are. So how could you say there's 4 Avos? You don't know who the Av is going to be because you're not coming from Reuven or Shimon. You don't know where you're coming from. So if we say only 3 Avos, so maybe that's the reason. So you don't know. So you don't know who it's going to be. So Ihaki says the 1 second. Ihaki says the Gemara. Imayis nami le'adin and imirach kasin and imilei kasin. But you don't know if you come from Rachel Leah, and yet we say that it's 4 imayis. You shouldn't say there's 4 imayis, right? You should just stop by the 2 imayis because no one of us know if we come from Rachel Leah, Bills. We have no idea. So it says the Gemara. Well, what's the real reason? Ela ad hacha chashivi, tzvela chashivi. The reason is because who's chashiv until the shvatim. The Avos are the ones who are chashiv. After that, they're not so chashiv. So that's why we only say there's 3 Avos. Until the 4 months, those are the ones who are chashiv, and after that, they're not so chashiv. Tanya idach. We have another price that says similar. Fair chashiv Tanya idach. I should just mention it because it's this parsha that Ibn Yaakov Shneim Asar. We mentioned a little bit last night that that's the idea that Reuven, no matter whatever happened, nevertheless is still part of the 12 shvatim. So he may not be chashiv to be one of the Avos, but he certainly was part of the 12 shvatim. Fine. Tan Yidach, another brayso that tells us Avodah Mishpachas ain't current Isam Abba Plani or Ima Planis. When it comes to Avodah Mishpachas, you don't call them the appellation of Abba Plani or Ima Planis. That's the lashon chashiv. But the servants of Rabbi Gamliel says so you current Isam Abba Plani or Ima Planis. They did give them that kind of appellation. My solicitor says the word. It sounds like it's a contradiction with this story. There's no Mishum Chashivi because they were very special. They were very special. So Amar Blazer, next Gemara, my desivkin of Rachel B'Shmecha Sakapi. What does it mean? Pasuk says, "I'm going to bless you with my life, with my name. With your name, I will lift up my hands." Right? I'll bless you with my life. That's Kriyat Shema. With your name, I will lift up my hands. That's Tefillah. If a person says Kriyat Shema and Shemana Esrei, Olav Akasav Omer, right? A person's going to have a very satisfactory life. Baruch Hashem. His soul is going to be satisfied. He's going to be zechet. If a person says Shema and Shema Esrei, his lips are singing praises, right? Shema and Shema Esrei. Fine. Now we have to be able to quickly. The next Amud is going to all be dealing with various endings of the Shema Esrei, and we know some of these endings. Some people will remember them where they are, so we're not going to explain. It says the Gemara. When Beleza would finish davening, Amar Haki, this is what he would say: HaKadosh Baruch Hu should dwell within us love and friendship. We should have success. We should have students and hope. We should have good friends. We should have good yitzers in this world. We should be able to get up and to find the fear of the Rebbeinu Shalom. We should have all good soul, good spirits, etc. That's how he would finish the Shemona Esrei. Rabbi Yochanan Basar Messiah Sluso, Rabbi Yochanan would finish Shemona Esrei. Amar Hachi, Yiratzim Lefanecha Hashem Lekeinu, Shetotit Shteinu, Hashem should see our embarrassment, V'tabet B'arasim, should see the things that happen to us negatively. This is Slabish B'rachamecha, this is Kasa B'uzecha, this is Sadza B'chatzidusecha, this is Azza B'chanusecha. Hashem should essentially dress us with His rachamim, and should take care of us with His power, and essentially give us chanina, give us chen. Hashem should essentially take care of us and shine His bright lights on us, that we should all have a good life. When he finished Manasseh, this is what he would say. Each one had their own version. We shouldn't have any shame, or the site says we shouldn't be any more shame when we come up Laylan Ba'ad more than our forefathers. Meaning we should be just as good as them at least. Reb Chia Basad Masli, Reb Chia, when he finished davening, Amar Hachi, Yiratzim Fanach Hashem Lekeinu Shetei Terasum Naseinu. The Torah should be our focus. Al Yad V'Libeinu V'Yachzuchu Einenu. And we should be able to have our life and have a comfortable life, and shouldn't be in major tsaris. By the way, everybody finished the Shemona Esrei, and somehow all the students knew how each one finished it, right? So clearly they were sharing it, because Shemona Esrei you do quietly. Reb Rav Basad Tlusei, this is the last one, maybe the second last one we'll do. Amar Hachi, what was his line? Yiratzim Fanach Hashem Lekeinu Shetei L'Chaim Aruchim, Chaim Shel Shalom, Chaim Shel Tova, Chaim Shel Bracha, Chaim Shel Parnasa, Chaim Shel Shechilas HaTzomis, Chaim She'em Yish B'hem Chaim Yiraschet, Chaim She'em B'hem Bushach Lima, Chaim Shel Yoshev V'Chovesh, Chaim Shel Deimon Avastev Yirah Shemayim, Chaim Shel Tamal Zlonos, Kol Mashal Sibin Al Tova, which we have adapted by Rosh Chodesh bench. That's how he would finish Manasseh every day. Rabbi Basad Slusei, how would Rabbi finish? Yiratzim Fanach Hashem Lekeinu V'Kevasem Shetatzilenu Me'azei Pana Me'azus Pana Me'adam Ra Pegra Me'Yetzer Ra Mechaver Ra Mishachin Ra Mesotan Mashkas Me'Dik Kash Me'Baltin Kash Ben Shu Bemritz Ben Shu Enu Bembris, which is what we say every morning after we say all the brachas. The Kaimik Susei Allah the Rabbi. Fine, and this is how even though there were Shaitrim who would stand from the command of Antoninus to watch over Rebbe, nevertheless, Rebbe still said over this tefillah every day, even though he was totally protected. Have a wonderful day, wonderful Shabbos.